Today I'm going to talk about factoring when a is not equal to 1. When we're doing this, there's a couple things to keep in mind. So remember, our general form of a trinomial is ax squared plus bx plus c. At the end of the day, I need two numbers that are going to multiply to equal c and add to equal b. Because a is not equal to 1, so if I have two numbers that have to meet these conditions from here, honestly, it's a little bit of trial and error. It's a logical thinking process looking at those numbers. One other thing to keep in mind is the very first thing is see if there's a greatest common factor. If there is, take that out. And then you're going to look at two numbers that will multiply and two numbers that will add. So knowing that, let's look at this one here. So let's try and do these two. So first off, I'm going to factor out a 4 because 4 goes into all of these numbers. So 32 divided by 4 gives me 8. So I get 32, so 8x. 48 divided by 4 is 12. So now when I did this one actually turns out to be an a equals 1. So two numbers that multiply to positive 12 and add to negative 8 is going to be negative 6 and negative 2. 6 times 2 gives me 12. Negative 6 plus negative 2 gives me that negative 8. So we're good. So that GCF works great. This one is going to be a similar idea. Factor out a 3, and then a will be equal to 1. So here I'm going to get 3. Actually, we can factor out 3x. So I get x squared plus 7x plus 10. So then I'm going to have x plus 5 and x plus 2. 5 times 2 equals 10. 5 plus 2 equals 7. So now let's try and do a couple where there isn't a GCF. Okay, so let's try a couple of these ones. So here I have 2x squared plus 5x plus 3. What's nice about this one is I need to have two numbers that multiply to equal 3, as well as I have to have two numbers that multiply to equal 2. Those two numbers are both prime. So that's going to kind of give us a big hint on what we're going to fill in. I know that I have a plus sign and a plus sign here, so that also cleans it up a little bit that I have to have two plus signs here. The only way to get 2x squared is with a 2x and an x. The only way to get 3 is with a 3 and a 1. So now I have to think about where that's going to go. If I was to put the 3 in this spot, in my last spot here, at the end of the day I would get 2 times 3, which gives us 6, which is too much. So I have to have a 1 here, because I'm going to get that 2 times 1. And then my 3 has to go here. So when I do FOIL, so I get first, gives me my 2x squared. Outer gives me 2x. Inner, 3x. Those add to our 5. And then last gives us 3. So that one works. This next one is a slight twist on that. So now I'm going to have two numbers, two sets of brackets, my apologies. But now I know one of my signs has to be, one of my signs in my trinomial is a negative and one is a positive. Well, in order for this last sign to be a positive, I have to have either two plus signs or two minus signs. So in this case, it has to be two minus signs because it's minus 5x. So now I have this 2x squared like I did before. The only way to get that is with a 2x times an x. The only way to get this last 2 is with a 2 and a 1. So now I have to think about the ways to get that. Well, I have to get up to 5x's. So I probably want to go 2 times 2 and have a 1 here. So now let's do FOIL. So first I get my 2x squared. Outer, I get minus 4x. Inner, minus 1x. Last, I get my 2. Minus 4 and minus 1 gives us that minus 5. So this next one, a little bit more intimidating, a little bit trickier. So first thought right away should be, is there a GCF? No. So now this first term, I could use a 1 and a 4 or a 2 and a 2. This last term, I could use a 1 and 25 or 5 and 5. Well, 1 and 25 is going to cause really big numbers. I have to get 20 here. So this is where your number sense is really going to come into play. So I always start off by drawing out my brackets. I have a minus sign and then a plus sign. So similar to the last one, both of these have to be subtraction. From here, honestly, it's a little bit of trial and error. So let's think about our options. I have 5s and 2s, which when I multiply gives me 10. Well, 10 goes into 20. So that's where this number sense comes into play. So if I put 2x here and 2x here, I'm going to get my 4x squared. If I put 5 here, 5 here, I get 25. So now let's do FOIL and check. So first, so when I expand this out, so my first terms, I get 4x squared. 2 times 5 gives me minus 10x. 5 times 2 gives me minus 10x. That's my minus 20x. 5 times 5 gives me my plus 25. So it's really important that you always do a check, but a lot of it, when a is not equal to 1, these are your strategies. So when a is not equal to 1, your first thought should be, is there a GCF? Then it's two numbers that multiply to C, two numbers that add to equal B, and then you want to look at prime. See if there's any prime numbers and what restrictions that causes, and then you're using number sense. So it is a bit of trial and error, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of factoring when a isn't equal to 1 is just practice and exposure.